everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name's Meredith Phillips, and today I'm going to be sharing with you the query letter that got me an agent, and I'm also going to be sharing an earlier version of the query letter so that we can laugh at how bad it is. As we go through these, I'm going to try to share just some general tips about writing query letters. There is a lot to know about this single page document. So if you are considering traditional publication as a path that you may want to go down in the future, hopefully this will be helpful. I would highly recommend learning as much as you can, as early as you can, about query letters, what's done, what's not done, because there is really a lot to know. I will link below also a few other resources from around the web that I would highly recommend checking out that have helped me with my query letter writing skills as they are, and hopefully they'll help you too. Before we get started, I do want to make very clear a couple things. Number one, I do not believe that there's any such thing as a perfect query letter. I think you could give the same manuscript to 10 different writers, editors, agents, and ask them to write a query letter, and they would all come up with completely different letters, all of which could be very well done, very serviceable, very professional, but they would be completely different. So if you're in the process of writing a query letter, you're not aiming for perfection, because that's impossible. There's always more you could tweak. There's always like one more little phrase of explanation you could stick in there. There's always something you could reword to take out a word. Like there's always something else you could tweak. And after a while, you get to a point where you just have to stop and just let it be what it is. So the second thing here is I am not in any way trying to say that the query letters I'm going to show you today are, you know, some perfect example or that they're like the pinnacle of query writing. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is the letter got me an agent. That's it. If you want to see the full saga of me querying over the last several months, I'll link below 2 videos. There's the vlog, which is insanely long, but it does take you along every day of the journey, and you can see my reactions to everything as it was happening in real time. If you really just want a snapshot of what I all did and went through, there's a shorter video with a summary of what all happened, as well as a Q&A at the end. So I'll link those videos below for you. So let's go ahead and jump into these queries. I'm going to start with the draft version of this query letter. This is the oldest version of the query that I could find on my computer. I'm pretty sure this is the version of the query that I submitted with my application to the Smidge Pit mentorship program back, oh my gosh, when was that? Like last summer? Jeez. Anyway, this I think you'll find is not like poorly written, but it's not exactly a great query letter. I'm going to go ahead and read through the whole thing, and then I'll look into picking apart some pieces that are a little maybe not so hot. All right, so here we go. Dear Agent, To Woo a Wife is an 83,000 word standalone historical romance with series potential. It is perfect for readers who love seeing women in non-traditional roles, as in Kate Bateman's Her Majesty's Rebels series, and fans of the blue stocking and rake pairing, as in Ava Lee's How the Wallflower Was Won. Lady Hannah Beaumont is determined to leave her mark on the world through architectural constructions. No one believes her competent enough for such an endeavor, so Hannah sets her sights on the Royal Academy's upcoming exhibition. If her work is accepted for display, she'll have the leverage necessary to bring her designs to life. The only thing she needs now is peace and quiet to create. Unfortunately, her bothersome new husband has other ideas. After a lifetime of verbal abuse from his father, Christopher Westfall, Viscount Tunbridge, has finally gambled, drank, and scandalized his way into an escape, his own private residence in London. The catch? He must first agree to a marriage of his father's choosing. He doesn't much care who the woman is. She is a means to an end after all, but Lady Hannah proves to be confoundingly alluring. Christopher wants more than just the townhome, though. A marriage may provide a haven for himself, but it leaves his younger sister alone with their father's harsh criticism. A series of desperate wagers has Christopher confident he can win guardianship over his sister. He only needs to make friends with his wife first. As a member of Regency Fiction Writers and an alumnus of the New York Times bestselling author Adrienne Young's Writing with the Soul workshop, good grief, that's a big phrase. I love crafting stories with heart, heat, and historical accuracy. I live in Texas with my husband and 2 Saudi Arabian rescue dogs. Thank you for your consideration. Kindest regards, Meredith Phillips. This whole thing is 304 words. The sweet spot is between 250 and 300-ish. Although recently I've heard that when people reference that word count number, they're really just talking about the plot paragraphs right here. So if we're only looking at that, that is 195 words, which is maybe a little underdeveloped. It is underdeveloped. So that's the first version. It's not the worst thing, but there's definitely a lot in here that we could fix up. So there are a couple of questions that need to be answered within a query letter, and this one does not have answers to all of them, or it's at least like kind of unclear. So we'll go through that here in a second, but let's scroll down to here because I have marked up my own query letter. So let's start with this opening paragraph. There is a little bit of debate over where to put this metadata paragraph. The metadata paragraph should include your title, your word count, the age category, the genre, and your comps, your comp titles. So this does have all of those components. I have the title right here. I've got my word count. I've got the age category, genre, and then the comp titles are down here. Some people like putting this at the very top. Other people like putting it at the end of the letter. It doesn't really matter. I feel like most agents that I've heard talk about this prefer it at the top because, especially with the age category and genre, it sort of sets some basic expectations for what the story is going to be, which is just sort of helpful to kind of get into the mindset of that before jumping into your plot information. I also like it at the top. To me, it feels like a nice little introduction to my project. And this is like a business letter, right? You're proposing a business deal to these agents. So this sort of just sets that up for them. And I like it best. I think it sounds weird if you're like, "Dear agent, Lady Hannah Beaumont is determined to leave her mark." Like, what, huh? Who is it? I don't know. It's just like so abrupt to me. So anyway, it doesn't matter. If you prefer to start with the plot, you absolutely can. But I've put mine at the top here. Let's look at a few things. Number one, I didn't even mark this, but you should write this out. So really this should be like this. Don't do the little K. Just write it out and round to the nearest 1,000. I've seen some people who are like, my book is 83,492 words long. You don't need to do that. Just round to the nearest 1,000. My comp titles here are decent. They certainly do match the tone and mood of my book. And they are relatively recent. Kate Bateman's series here is an ongoing series. The third and final book is out, I believe, this month, or in like 2 weeks or something. It's coming out very soon, which I'm very excited about. I love this series and I love Kate Bateman. The Ava Lee book is a little older. This one is from 2022. That's not like horrifically old. It's within the range. It's fine. Typically you want your comp titles to land within 2 to 3 years of now. At most 5 years. Any older than that, you're probably pushing it, and it's not generally recommended to have them older than 5 years. You also want to make sure you're not comping to wildly successful mega authors. Don't comp to Brandon Sanderson. Don't comp to Sarah J. Maas. You're trying to say with these comp titles, hey, I think my book is in line with these in terms of what the market is, like who are the readers for these books and how well it's going to sell. You're not going to sell 25 bajillion million copies like Sarah J. Maas. I'm so sorry. Like, that's really not going to happen. So don't comp to that. These two authors, I feel like my work is in line with where I'd like to see it end up at least. However, I did end up changing these for the final one. We'll get into that later. I also later on ended up taking out this because I am so entrenched. I am so entrenched in the historical romance universe that to me, this makes perfect sense. Blue Stocking and Rake. Everyone knows what that, nobody knows what that is. Okay, I found out after I shared this with a few people. They were like, what is this? So ideally an agent would know what this is. However, a lot of people didn't know. So I did end up taking that out later when I realized it was maybe not quite as clear as I thought it was. Let's jump down to the bottom real quick and look at the bio. And then we'll look at the plot stuff, since that's like the most the most important part of this. The bio paragraph should be relatively short. If you have any writing credentials whatsoever, you can put it in here. I don't have really anything, or I didn't at this point. I didn't go to school for, creative writing. I had never taken any kind of like certification program or anything. I'd never been published in anything. I'd never been shortlisted for anything. Like I don't have any real credentials. So to show that I'm serious about writing, I am part of the Regency Fiction Writers, which is a membership, a group you can join if you write Regency fiction. And I'd also taken the workshop here, which is, I don't know, I didn't have anything. So like, these are the two things to show I'm trying. I'm investing time and money into this industry. Here it is, right? And then I just have like a little thing about where I'm living currently. I have a husband and dogs, it's not the most compelling bio paragraph. And I did change this pretty completely for the final version, but that was as good as I could make it for this point. Okay, so let's get into these plot paragraphs up here. I tried to color code them a little bit to correlate with the questions that you should be asking as you write these query letters, and really you should be asking these questions as you draft or brainstorm or outline or whatever your process is for your book. So first things first, we need to know who the main characters are. This is a dual POV story, and it's a romance, which usually involves just two people. Sometimes it involves more, so if you have more, you got to fit them all in here. For the lead love interests, you need to have them highlighted in your query letter. So I have Lady Hannah Beaumont is my main female character, and then Christopher Westphal is the main male character. They're named in this thing, like that's really all you have to do to answer who is the character, who are the main characters. These two folks right here. We also need to know, what do these characters want? What is their aim? What is their goal within the story? Hannah is determined to leave her mark on the world through architectural constructions, and Christopher wants to win guardianship over his sister. So those two things I think are pretty clearly stated here. We also need to ask the question, what are they willing to do to get it? What lengths are they willing to go to in order to achieve this goal? For Hannah, she is trying to get into this exhibition to put her work on display. For Christopher, he needs to make friends with his wife, which doesn't really make sense. Like, what does that have to do with winning guardianship over his sister? Nobody knows, but we'll get into it, okay? There also needs to be obstacles. If they have a goal and they are willing to do a lot to get it, and they just go and get it, then the story's gonna be over pretty fast. So what is standing in their way? What is the obstacle? Who's the opponent? Where's the antagonist? Hannah's is kind of vague. No one believes her competent, so like society is maybe standing in her way. Her bothersome new husband is standing in her way. And as for Christopher, Hannah is the one standing in his way, sort of, maybe. It's a little vague. And then finally, we need to know, what are the stakes? What happens if they fail? If Hannah doesn't get into the exhibition, what is the consequence? If Christopher doesn't win guardianship over his sister, what's the consequence? I don't think there's anything really in here for Hannah in terms of like, what if she fails? She won't be able to build anything? Okay. Christopher's is a little more clear. He doesn't want his sister to be left alone with their father. So there is, I feel like that's a little more stakesy, but there were also just some sort of logistical questions, things that didn't quite make a whole lot of sense here. So like in this thing, it says he's figured out how to get his own private residence, which is great, but he has to agree to get married first. So does he have the residence already? But then if he does, why does he have to get married? What does getting married have to do with having his own place? Like, that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. There's also, like we already mentioned this, he wants to win guardianship over his sister, but he has to make friends with his wife. What does that have to do with anything? Why? Why would he need to do that? We don't know, because I didn't explain it. So that's the first version. I can't remember if I sent this to my critique partners at all. I think I just did it myself. I did do multiple drafts of it, but this was pretty much it. So part of the Smooch Pit mentorship program was your mentor was going to look at your query letter and give you some suggestions for reworking it, revising it, and I did get that. And I think you'll see with this final version that it is a lot more complete. It's a lot more fleshed out. The questions that we were like, what is this? How are these things connected? I think they're answered a lot better in this. Is this perfect? No, it is not. But this is the one that I sent out into the query trenches, and it did work to a pretty good degree, I guess. I also want to say before I show you this, this went through I probably had 12 or more different people look at this and give me feedback before I actually started querying with it. I had my mentor, like we said, I'm pretty sure I had my critique partners read it and give me feedback. I had multiple other mentees in the program review it and give me feedback. And I also sent it off for a paid critique from an editor. So a lot of people had input on this. This was not just me trying my best. And I would highly, highly recommend, if you are querying or you're about to start querying, send your query letter to many other people to get their input, preferably people who know what they're talking about when it comes to query letters, because again, there's very specific pieces of information that need to be in here. And if it's just like some random person or like someone who's generally interested in writing and reading, they might not know exactly what this is supposed to look like. Obviously, if you have writer friends who know about query letter writing, you can send it to them. You can pay to have critiques done. If you just get the query letter critiques, you can usually find those for pretty cheap, like 25 to 50 bucks. I think that's totally worth it. If you can afford it, go for it. You can also submit this to places like the Pub Tips subreddit. They will give potentially some harsh criticism, but it is good critique the vast majority of the time. So there are a lot of free ways to get this critiqued. At the very least, at the absolute minimum, send it to somebody who has a brain in their head who can look through it and just look for typos for you, okay? Like something. Please send it to somebody else. Don't just send it into the query trenches and you're the only person who's ever looked at it. That's my personal advice and opinion here. So let me share with you the final version of the query letter. Okay, here we go. Dear Agent, A Rogue's Guide to Winning a Wife is an 89,000 word dual POV adult Regency romance that was selected by Alexandra Vasti for the 2024 Smooch Pit Mentorship Program. It combines the wagers in Mirtha Waters' To Love and to Loathe and the slow burn spicy romance and banter in Sarah McLean's Knockout. Christopher Westfall, Viscount Tunbridge, didn't intend to lose 5,000 pounds at the card tables, but for his father, it's the final provocation in a long line of scandals. A wife, he concludes, is just the thing to bring Christopher to heel. Much to Christopher's chagrin, the chosen bride is Hannah, a spinster wallflower with an odd penchant for architectural design. While a platonic relationship would suit him just fine, he can't simply ignore his wife because he's embroiled himself in a series of wagers. The prize? A means to protect his younger sister from the relentless verbal abuse their father inflicts on them both. While he could never reveal his private shame to Hannah, a mere stranger, winning the wagers requires her to host a ball of epic proportions, which he knows she'll resist unless he can woo his way into her good graces. The newly minted Hannah, Lady Tunbridge, agreed to marry a known rake, assuming he would be gallivanting around London, leaving her free to craft masterpieces for the Royal Academy's exhibition. The public showing is the perfect way to begin a meaningful legacy for herself. But when her frustratingly handsome husband begins uncharacteristic displays of courtship, complete with thoughtful gifts and dramatic gestures, she can't help but think there's something else going on. So Hannah proposes a wager of her own. If he can prove he's truly a changed man, she'll play the part of the perfect wife. With deadlines for the wagers and the exhibition converging, Christopher is forced to lure Hannah away from her ambitions, so ball preparations can take precedence. But as unexpected passion and deeper feelings develop, he must choose between saving his sister or supporting Hannah's dreams and winning her heart. Watching women twirl across the silver screen in hoop skirts as a child inspired me to write novels set in centuries past, featuring characters in pursuit of hope and love. I live in Texas with my husband and 2 Saudi Arabian rescue dogs. Sadly, I'm not in possession of a single ball gown. Yet. Thank you for your consideration. Kindest regards, Meredith E. Phillips. Amazing. Okay, so very different than that very first one. There are some pieces, there are some little elements and phrases that are the same and carried over, but for the most part, this is a completely different query letter. All right, so let's get into what all I changed, why I changed it, where questions are answered, etc., etc. So my big writing credential was the fact that this book was picked for the Mooch Pit. Good job. The mentorship program. Normally, that kind of credential would go in your bio paragraph, but because that program is directly related to this manuscript, I wanted to put it up top. So it was clear, hey, this has been through a mentorship program. It was, chosen by a prominent author in the historical romance space. So like, look at me, amazing, right? So if you have a writing credential that is very specific to this particular project that you're querying, you might want to put that up in that metadata paragraph. I also changed my comps. These are bigger comp titles. Martha Waters and Sarah MacLean are bigger sellers in the genre. I felt a little bit intimidated to comp to Sarah MacLean. I feel like she's one of the most well-known current writers within the space, but that was what was suggested to me, so I was like, okay, I'm gonna go for it, I guess. This one was a little bit of a stretch. To Love and to Loathe is from 2021, which is getting a little old, but it is the first book in a series that just concluded, I think, last year, so like that was a little more current. And it did have wagers. This first book in the series had a bunch of like wagers going on between the characters, which is very similar to my book. So I was like, all right, I'm going to use it. Knockout is from 2023. That one was a more recent, and that was a pretty good comp to use. All right, so I also changed the order in which you're introduced to the two main protagonists. This story really is Christopher's story. Hannah is more like the love interest rather than Hannah being the main character and Christopher's the love interest. So if you're writing a dual POV romance or something where you have like two main protagonists, there's probably one protagonist that's like more the main protagonist than the other one, and you probably want to start your query letter with that person. So I've got him up here at the top. I also changed that gambled, drank, and scandalized his way into a marriage or whatever was in the first one. I said exactly what he did. He lost 5,000 pounds at the cards table, which would have been quite a lot of money back in the day, right? So I have our two main characters highlighted, Christopher and Hannah. What do they want? That's still sort of the same thing as the first one. He wants a way to protect his younger sister. She wants to enter the exhibition with her architectural stuff. What are they willing to do to get those things? He is willing to make friends with his wife, woo his way into her good graces. But we now understand why that is a thing he has to do in order to save his sister. Because those two things seem very unconnected in that first query letter, right? He's involved himself in a wager that includes her. And she has to do this ball thing, okay? He has to become friends with her at least so that he can convince her to host a ball so that he can win the wagers so that he can save his sister. Do you see why this query letter was so hard to write? Oh my gosh. I'm never writing a book with wagers again, I'll tell you that much. Who is standing in their way? Like his father's obviously like partly the antagonist here, but really at the beginning of the book, she's the antagonist. She doesn't want to have anything to do with him. She's like, leave me alone so I can do my work. And he's like, no, let's go to the opera. I don't know. He has to win her over. And again, then flipped, he is sort of the antagonist for her, especially in the beginning, because she just wants to be left alone. And he's trying to be like, yeah, look at me. And then I really like this final piece here at the bottom about choosing between saving his sister or winning over Hannah. This is a romance, okay? The ultimate rule in a romance is it must have a happily ever after, period, end of story. They have to end up together. Nobody's dying, nobody's breaking up. They will be together in some fashion at the end of the story. They don't have to be married, but they have to be in some sort of committed relationship with each other. If they don't end up in a committed relationship, it's not a romance. Romeo and Juliet is not a romance. Titanic, not a romance. He dies at the end. Spoiler alert. It's not a romance, it's tragedy. It has a love story in it, but the ultimate end is a tragedy. Anyway, so if you're reading this query letter, I feel like this sets up like almost an impossible choice, right? You know he's going to end up with Hannah, but how is he going to be able to do that and save his sister? Because those two things doesn't seem like they can happen at the same time. So I like that. I think it's a really compelling hook for hopefully reading the pages, right? If you're an agent reading this. And then finally, I redid the entire bio paragraph down here, I included a little bit about like where my interests started in historical things, and then the same line about Texas, the dogs, the husband. And then I also really enjoyed the last line here and like the hoop skirt stuff. I think that adds just a little flair, a little personality, a little voice to the query letter, right? So those are my query letters. A poor example and hopefully a slightly better example. Also, I do want to point out, I'm sure you already know this, but you're not to actually send this dear agent. You put their name in there, dear Susan, dear Catherine, whoever you are, right? You update that. Another thing I wanted to point out is I did not include any personalization in my query letters. This is something you can do, certainly, if you feel obliged to. Some people like to add a line of personalization explaining to the agent why you selected them. Why are you sending this to them specifically? A lot of people end up saying, oh, I see that you've represented these books and my book is like that, or you're asking for these specific types of things in your manuscript wish list, and my book has those things. Maybe you met the agent at a conference or something like that and you want to remind them of that. You can absolutely add personalization. There's a lot of debate, I feel like, amongst writers and agents over whether the personalization is worth it, if it matters in the end. I know some writers are like really locked into that personalization and they will personalize every single query letter. I did that with the first book I queried, and I just didn't feel like it did much for me. I don't know. So this time around, I was like, I'm not personalizing a single dang one. All right, I'm sending this to them because they represent historical romance, and there's not many agents who do that. So here you go. Oh, and just so we have a comparison here, this final query letter, don't listen, be nice. The final query letter was 403 words, which is a little lengthy. The plot paragraphs just by themselves were 287. That fits in that 250 to 300 range. 400 words is maybe a little long for a query letter, but it does fit on one page. And again, this went through so many people. I felt like, I'm sure there's a way I could reduce this down to under 400 words, but I really could not get it down without sacrificing something that I really didn't want to sacrifice. And in the end, it worked out. So I hope that was helpful. I hope that was interesting. You now know a little bit more about the book and the plot and all that kind of stuff. If you have any questions about querying, query letters, anything like that, let me know in the comments. If there's enough comments or questions, I might do like a follow-up Q&A kind of video. So let me know. But otherwise, if you liked this video, give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, you can click the subscribe button. I usually post videos on Fridays. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I will see you next time. Bye.